Okay, everyone. Well, since it is 7 o'clock, we do like to start on time. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Matt Binder. I am the program assistant here at the Schaumburg Township District Library. Welcome to tonight's program. Tonight we have a very special guest. We have Brian Mikulski. He is going to be talking about Myanmar, which has recently been in the news, but Brian visited years before the turmoil that is happening now. So you get to see a different side of a country that I think we're all thinking about and curious about. Brian is a world traveler. He recently just came back from South America, was there just before COVID hit, and he was telling me before we started that he is itching to get back out there. So without any more from me, here's Brian.
Great, thank you, Matt, and I appreciate being invited back. Patrons, it's, hopefully we have this light at the end of the tunnel here, staying safe and making our small sacrifices so that we can get back to travel. So with that, let's dive into mysterious Myanmar. Why do I call it this title? Well, I think there's a lot to unpack and to learn. So that's what we're going to really dive into for the first section. I'll share some of the history of Myanmar, as well as a bit about its geography and its people. Then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of the evening. Let's explore. This is where we'll go through the destinations that I visited during my 30 days in Myanmar. I'll share some successes and challenges met along the way. And of course, key information that may help if you do decide to put Myanmar on your bucket list. Lastly, let's deconstruct. This is where I'll give you my key takeaways, and then I'll look forward to answering your questions, which you can type into the chat section at any point that you think of them, and we'll tick through those one by one. All right, so as promised, let's learn. A bit about me first. I grew up in Des Plaines, not too far from where you are, and I used to teach primary grades in the suburbs of Chicago. Then I quit my full-time job. My parents thought I was crazy, and I decided, you know what, I want to travel the world. I want to get out there and experience it firsthand. So I ended up going on a 2-year journey, including 20 countries, and Myanmar became my surprise favorite during that nearly 2-year trip. Southeast Asia in general is fantastic, but Myanmar is this hidden gem that I'm looking forward to bringing to life for you tonight. So we'll kind of zoom in on that 1 month that I was there in the fall of 2016. And right now I'm broadcasting from Evanston. So why Myanmar? Well, I have to admit to you, I could not locate it on a map before I even left, which is a little embarrassing. But now, of course, I'll never forget where it is and sort of the impact that it had on me. I had so many great experiences in Southeast Asia. Hiking the hills in Vietnam, trying all of this amazing cuisine in Laos, dancing late into the night in Bangkok, Thailand. And, Myanmar sort of was a natural extension of all that prior activity. It was recommended by every backpacker that I talked to. They said, get there before word gets out. And part of the appeal is, of course, that it is so, unseen by Westerners. So plus I had this open schedule of, just booking one-way tickets wherever I felt like, whenever I felt like. So it was just one of those, events where things sort of lined up and I didn't force it. And eventually it just fell into place. So, of course, it's the green country, which is the largest in Southeast Asia. You'll notice Thailand to its southeast and China to its northeastern border. A few facts about it. The capital is called Naypyidaw, and the largest city is Yangon, formerly Rangoon. They speak Burmese. The country is, of course, formerly Burma. And then you'll notice Buddhism, almost 9 in 10 people there are Buddhist. And this is a theme we're going to revisit throughout the evening. Over 50 million people live in Myanmar, and it's made of a constellation of ethnic groups that are all very proud of their unique heritages, languages, and customs. Bamar is the majority there, with Shan and Karen, also notably mentioned. They are 11 and a half hours ahead of us. So they are just waking up in Myanmar right now. You're going to just notice some repeated elements. Buddhism, including the stupas and temples, gold plated, carved of marble, of wood. I never counted how many temples and stupas are in this presentation, but I bet in person I saw like 2,000 or 3,000 in the month that I was there. You'll notice some unique clothing, including the lanju that I'm wearing in the photo. And it's basically what men would wear in America, sort of the equivalent of like jeans, blue jeans. Men in Myanmar would sort of wear this on a casual stroll, maybe shopping in the market, or just a day out with their family. And you also have Tanaka paste, which is being smeared on my face there. It's mashed from the Tanaka root, which is native to Myanmar, and mixed with water. And you'll actually notice that like metal plate on the ground there. And then this woman is brushing it on my face. It has a cooling effect similar to Vicks VapoRub. And it sort of acts as a sunscreen. So you'll see a lot of the little kitties with cute little designs on their faces. And of course, they love when tourists are wearing the Tanaka paste as well. Now, I want to catch you up on a lot of Myanmar's history. So I'm going to do that with a video that's about 2 minutes and 20 seconds from CNN. This is going to take you up to about 2010, and then I'll unpack what's happened the last 11 or so years.
Well, returning now to the crisis in Myanmar, the military took control in 1962 and has ruled the country with an iron grip ever since. Tim Lister tells us how Myanmar, also known as Burma, got to this point.
Battle of Burma. In the Second World War, the British and Japanese fought a merciless campaign for control of Burma, keenly aware of its strategic location and natural riches. When the guns fell silent, Japan was defeated, Britain exhausted. Burma gained independence almost without a fight. But it also had no working institutions and an ethnic insurgency that would go on for decades to deal with. The army stepped into the breach, quickly growing to a force of more than 200,000 men, and has been there ever since. 1962 was the watershed when a candidate the generals didn't like won elections. General Ne Win mounted a coup. He ruled Burma for a quarter century, launching what he called the Burmese way of socialism. It was ruinous, a bizarre mixture of nationalization and astrology. While Asian tigers like Thailand and South Korea roared, Burma stagnated, spending as much as 40% of its income on a huge standing army. Because he thought 9 was a lucky number, Ne Win abolished the currency overnight, replacing it with banknotes that could be divided by 9. And like Idi Amin in Uganda, he also expelled thousands of ethnic Indians, despite their vital economic role. Ne Win occasionally dabbled with democratic change, but never let it flower. Just before the democracy protests in 1988, he warned, if the army shoots, it hits. There's no firing in the air to scare. He was followed by a junta even more secretive and hardline, one of its first moves to change the country's name from Burma to Myanmar with the Adaptation of Expression Law. Since 1992, Than Shwe has emerged as the senior general in the junta. Occasionally, the regime has allowed Aung San Suu Kyi, the beacon of the pro-democracy movement, to travel in the country, but for 12 of the last 18 years, it's kept her under house arrest. Observers say Than Shwe and 2 other senior generals make all the major decisions, such as suddenly moving the country's capital from Yangon to a remote northern town, giving civil servants hours to pack and move. The most flagrant sign of the regime's remoteness from its poverty-stricken citizens was the lavish wedding for Than Shwe's daughter last year. Videos of the wedding posted on YouTube enraged democracy activists at home and overseas. Some observers estimate that the wedding gifts were worth $20 million. If history is any guide, Than Shwe and his fellow generals won't see dialogue as a way out of this crisis. They see the military, now estimated at 400,000 strong, as the only guarantee against anarchy. Tim Lister, CNN, Atlanta.
So that takes us to about 2011, and as you may know, it has had since been a quasi-democracy that this video we just watched alluded to. So Suu Kyi, she was elected the leader of the NLD, the National League for Democracy, in 2015. However, if you fast forward to November of last year, the military junta refused to accept the results of that election, even though over 4 in 5 seats went to Suu Kyi's party. So with that refusal of acceptance, the government was overthrown on February 1st, literally 2 months ago. Since then, Suu Kyi and the president have been detained, including additional politicians as well as activists. And the military literally just pulled the off switch on Myanmar overnight. So this meant the suspension of television broadcasts, flights in and out of the country, the internet, and even banks being closed. So you can imagine how enraged the citizens were. So, but they peacefully protested, and this is very important to mention. They voiced their dissatisfaction peacefully. By the way, the current photos are from the New York Times. I just want to give proper credit there. All the other photos that you're seeing are my own. But the military erected barricades, deployed soldiers, and even put snipers near parade routes, protest routes, I should say. And then you're unfortunately going to see some disturbing images here, but on February 20th, the most deadly day of the protests, the military opened fire and actually killed 60 people and injured hundreds more. So I talk about this because I don't want to be tone deaf, as to what's going on in the country right now. Myanmar is certainly in my thoughts. However, I also want to share with you my Myanmar, how it was and hopefully how it can become once again. So on that somber note, let's explore this fascinating country. As you could probably figure out, it's not currently recommended to go to Myanmar, but if you are able to go there again, it is a 4-week visa. The price varies. Generally, the sooner you apply for your visa, the cheaper it is. And it's valid for 3 months from the issue date. In this picture on the right-hand side, that is the actual Myanmar visa that I received. They also offer e-visas online. Now, with Burmese, pitch matters. Most of the words in the language are 1 syllable long, but can have 5 or even 6 different meanings, just depending on the highness or lowness of your voice. These smaller ethnic groups that I alluded to earlier, each have their own languages and their own cultural identities. English is spoken in the larger, more touristic cities. And, on the flip side of that coin, the Burmese love when you attempt to speak their language. They sort of giggle behind their hand and, try to help you out. But it's a good way to show your respect and at least put in a little effort while you're in a foreign land. So I wanted to teach you 2 phrases. The first is hello. You'll notice the Burmese script in the middle and then the phonetic pronunciation at the bottom. Minga laba. And if you want to practice that aloud with me, go right ahead. Minga laba. Excellent. Second, I think it's important to say thank you. And the way you do that, it's a little longer, so we'll break it up into 2 parts. Chezu, tinbarte. We'll put it all together. Chezu, tinbarte. Very nice. I can't actually hear you, but I feel your vibes, and now that you have a little Burmese under your belt, we can start our journey in the largest city, which you now know is Yangon, formerly Rangoon. You're looking at the Shwedagon Pagoda, definitely the most famous in the country. It is massive, gold-plated. I happened to go there on a beautiful sunny day, and then part of your admission ticket is to return at night when it is illuminated by the lights and that gold just really shimmers. Casual Buddhists will worship here, as well as very devout Buddhists, and of course monks are constantly surrounding the pagoda. I took a train ride in Yangon, and this was like a big famous one. Like, oh, you're going to see all these beautiful things. But these Burmese teenagers saw me, and it was like two magnets coming at me. They were just so excited that there was an American on board. They found out I was from Chicago and wanted to know if I hung out with Michael Jordan, if I'd ever met Barack Obama. They were asking all these grammatical English questions. They were teaching me Burmese. So this whole like 2-hour ride, I don't think I took one picture outside of my window, but instead just, bonding with these local kids. And, I think that's the type of traveler that I try to be, to always say yes more than I say no, and to, put myself outside of my comfort zone. So daily life regarding Myanmar, they are generally an early to bed, early to rise culture. Younger people had been on social media, whereas the older generations prefer to still socialize face-to-face, maybe sipping a cup of tea at the outdoor markets or maybe street food stalls. Most people will set up shops on the street, just providing different goods and services. That's generally how most vendors will make a living. And their life does very much revolve around Buddhism. One concept that's still hard for me to understand: dating means marriage. There's no in between. And within that, people will not really date outside of their ethnic group. So it's a foreign concept for a Westerner, but it very much makes sense for the Burmese. It's important to know how to show respect in, I would say, all of Southeast Asia. Myanmar goes right along with that. Wear modest clothing in religious places especially. And if you got a Buddha tattoo in college, you're going to want to cover that up, because any images of Buddha would be very disrespectful. It's expected that you donate at temples. This is the equivalent of 5 or 10 cents United States currency. Never touch a monk's robe. Women actually can't even shake hands with the monks. And there were certain Buddhist monasteries and places of worship that women were not even allowed to enter. So they are lagging behind in some equal rights as well. You always tuck your feet beneath your body when you sit on the ground, so that your toes point away from the Buddha statues. And no public displays of affection. That even includes holding hands. So we've stuck a pin in our map, and now we're going to head a little north and then east as we head toward Pa'an. And the H is silent, so you would just pronounce that as Pa'an. Pa'an is just this wide open expanse of untouched Burmese landscape. There's a really cute guest house called So Brothers in Pa'an, and they offer these tuk-tuk tours. And this is basically a typical tuk-tuk in Southeast Asia, a motorbike with this carriage attached to it. So some fellow guest house friends, came along for this unique ride through the Pa'an countryside. We explored caves, we took a long boat tour, got a nice view of sunset. Just got to walk and hike, breathe in that fresh air, get away from those big crowded Southeast Asian cities, which are charming in their own right. But the dazzling natural beauty surrounding us in so many of these places tonight was just such a refreshing change of pace. This is my only viral video on YouTube. It's got over 25,000 views. And it's just this high school group that happened to be rehearsing for a dance performance. Take a look and just pay attention to some similarities and differences of music that we're used to. I love that persistent percussive backbeat and their contagious enthusiasm. Such precise, movements bouncing up and down. I mean, really a physical feat, and of course, quite entertaining to watch as well. As far as staying safe, this is among the safest in the developing world. Very little crime takes place here. A lot of that is due to its strict culture and laws, which we've been learning about so far. Police stations are available in larger cities, and you may notice begging in tourist areas, like on the left side. And this is sad to me as a teacher, because these kids should be in school, but instead their parents have dolled them up and given them a pan to gather money. But obviously it's out of necessity, and it's just kind of heartbreaking to see that. So if you gave to every person that approached you in Myanmar, you would be out of money in no time, is the sad truth. Corruption, I didn't encounter this personally, but sometimes officials may ask for bribes by inventing issues. So they might say, you're not allowed to be here, give me whatever amount they just create on the spot. It's a minimal worry, generally speaking. Driving conditions, they're terrible roads. These vehicles are beat to what. Very aggressive drivers. So I love this juxtaposition of these solemn Buddhist monks who happen to have road rage. They just really be careful when you are driving or crossing the street. That's really just the main lesson there. Civil conflict, this is, present in some parts of the country, and this was even before the current events. So certain areas of the country require a permit and possibly a guide. And I think this is just general good advice no matter where you go. Foreigners should avoid talking about politics, participating in any rallies or protests. I love their currency. It's so beautiful and colorful. It's called the Chat. It's KYAT. They just show it with a big K, but it's pronounced Chat. And I was surprised by the plentiful ATMs in the majority of these places that we're visiting tonight in Myanmar. Usually credit cards and debit cards were accepted with just a 2 or 3% convenience charge. They love when you tip $1 or $2 bills that are unfolded and like crisp and brand new. So keep that in mind. And actually that's kind of true of a lot of Southeast Asia. I made Myanmar work on about $40 a day, and you could see half of that was just the hotel room. Normally I would stay in hostels as I backpack, but they just don't really exist in Myanmar. So it's kind of those guest houses like the So Brothers, very basic accommodations, but you have that privacy, which is very nice. Meals, I lived on street food, and most meals I would never go over $3. If you add a beer to that for $1, maybe you're at $5 after all that. Something that's frustrating about some places that you travel is dual pricing. This is where locals pay the real price, and then the vendor sees a foreigner walking down the way and doubles or even triples the price. But you think long term, and who really needs that extra buck or two? They probably need it much more than I do. Great spot to stock up on souvenirs for yourself and loved ones, precious stones, antiques, so many hand-carved pieces. And you bet, I wish I could have stuffed one of those into my backpack, but I had many more places to still travel. So at least I got the pictures there. We're gonna head further south now to Malamin. Buddha statues galore there. And speaking of Buddha statues, this is the largest reclining Buddha statue in the world. And in fact, you can ascend the stairs and enter the hollowed out Buddha. And inside are different like images, almost like life-size dioramas of like important scenes of this religion. So No photos were allowed there, but a very, very important and worthwhile pit stop, I thought. Tapestries being woven before your eyes, top quality for rock bottom prices. And then as my friends and I were walking down the streets in Malamine one day, this really jovial local Burmese guy, I think he had a beer in his hand. He was like, hey, there's a wedding going on. And he was just like calling us over. So they fed us some soup, and they taught us to dance. And we were just like in awe. It was amazing to just all of a sudden be thrust into this wedding ceremony. And you can just see this beautiful couple, very quaint and simple ceremony, but you could really feel that energy and love there. I love food and drink. I think that's maybe my favorite part of travel. Something important about Myanmar, it's very heavily influenced by Chinese and Indian cuisine. So a lot of that flavor will kind of pop up in different ways. I would say if you go to Myanmar, you have to go to Yangon just for the street food experience, because their stalls are smoking with these grilled meats, and people are jostling for position in line to get to the best stalls. And then you get this big plate of food and you have to sit at this child-sized table. And you feel like you're going to break the teeny tiny chair that you're sitting on, which one of my friends actually did. But it's fun. It's just about socializing, trying different things. Rice is always a staple. Vegetarians, not to worry, many options for you there. Stay away from tap water in Myanmar, instead buy bottled water. And then they really do have quite a beer culture. So I wanted to share a few dishes with you that I grew to love very quickly. The first was lepi tau, and this is really just like a fermented tea leaf salad, almost like a snack, mixed by hand. It's got that shredded cabbage, some tangy tomatoes, even fried beans in there for a little bit of protein, and they just top it with chilies depending on how spicy you like it. And of course, pair it with rice. Another one, mohinga. This is the national dish of Myanmar, and it's breakfast soup. So you wake up, you're already sweating because it's 80 degrees by 8 a.m. and then it's 90 degrees by 9 a.m. when you're sitting outside at the table having this piping hot soup, and you're just sweating, but you're just loving the flavors. It's rice noodles in fish broth, filled with all the locally grown vegetables and herbs, lemongrass, ginger, onions, they'll even put a hard-boiled egg on there, and banana blossoms just for a little refreshing twist. Lastly, pig's head salad. They will smoke a pig's head and sort of incorporate pickled tomato as well as long bean salad. It's a little stronger flavor because of the fish sauce. So if you don't mind that, then this dish is like truly heaven. Again, the spiciness varies based on how you like it. They ask you, and then you say if you want it tourist spicy or actually spicy, and then they'll accommodate accordingly. That kaffir lime leaf that they put on top just adds that nice fragrant, refreshing kick that you need after such an intense savory dish. Now we're going pretty far south here. Very few tourists get down to Dawei just because it is so far off the beaten path. And really, there's not a lot to do here, and I mean that in a very good way. It's just a place to enjoy the beaches and some sunsets. And fortunately, I made a friend at one of the hotels, Martin. So he and I were just attempting to ride and drive our motorbikes. The locals don't care. They don't want to see proof of a driver's license. If you have the equivalent of $15, it's yours to rent for the day. And I would not personally recommend, operating motorbikes in medium-sized towns, or certainly not larger cities. But in some of these more desolate places, I think it's safer, for yourself, and you're sort of out of everybody's way. So after getting some rest and relaxation in Dawai, Martin and I decided to go back to Yangon. And you can see that looks like a lot of distance. That would have been about an 8-hour bus ride. And things started out innocently enough. We had most of the bus to ourselves. You can see Martin, getting comfy there. The bus driver took off, and very quickly things went downhill. I'll let Martin take the story over from here.
Now, how do I sum up me and Brian's 25-hour bus journey across Myanmar? It was the ultimate test of endurance, good faith, and patience. No longer will me and Brian ever be saying, "Oh my God, I cannot believe my bus is running 2 minutes late." The bus ended up taking 25 hours. And when a man is spitting into a bottle in front of you with red saliva from chewing tobacco, you could pretty much go through everything. And the way that the people were so relaxed about everything was so reassuring, and they had very little stress. But it was a valuable lesson, and we survived very well and learned a lot.
So the length of the bus ride tripled, because not only the first bus broke down, but then after we waited on the side of a dusty road for a couple hours through the middle of the night, the second bus picked us up and promptly broke down as well. So yes, definitely kind of a badge of honor. And you bet as soon as we got home, we just collapsed in our hostel beds and like slept for so many hours. Now, getting around Myanmar, the infrastructure is still being built, so it's not exactly a smooth ride. Travel is actually prohibited in certain spots of the country, so obtain permits and get guides just to be on the safe side. And if you're just prone to car sickness in general or short on time, then flying is going to be a great way to save some time. Not necessarily money, but that's okay if you have a little extra to spend. Now, I arranged the transportation of Myanmar from least expensive to most. And on the right, you see option number 1, the pickup truck. It's cheap or even free. Locals will basically just pick you up. It's almost like hitchhiking, but it's a rough ride. I mean, there's no cushion. You're sitting on your bottom and you're just bouncing up and down like popcorn. It's very hot, it's intense, but fun with the right people. The next choice is trains. It's a large, old network of tracks, oftentimes delayed. This would not be the way to see the country as your only option, but it is kind of nice to do one train ride if you can. Bus rides, middle of the road as far as pricing. If you get a VIP bus, you're going to spend a little bit more money, but it's a manageable experience at that time. And then try to book ahead because you want to sit near the front, so you sort of avoid some of that car sickness. And speaking of cars, as well as motorbikes, just keep in mind that pedestrians have to yield to vehicles. So double check, triple check as you're crossing the road, because they really won't stop. It's like almost unbelievable to watch. Private drivers are for hire. Like I rented, I should say, hired a guide, and he drove me around in his on his motorbike deep into sort of the countryside, and was able to take me to all these places that a typical tour guide with a large group of people would not be able to access. Planes, as you know, safest and fastest, most expensive, but e-ticketing and sometimes last minute deals will allow you to save a few bucks here and there. All right, we're going north here to our next spot, which is Mandalay. You may have heard of Mandalay. Beautiful spot to visit. This is the Ubane Bridge that's made of timber. And during the sunset period there, I encountered a monk on a peaceful stroll. This is the March of 1,000 Monks, where they line up in single file and march into the monastery to break bread together. So they just have with them their soup pots, their mugs, and their napkins. And this is sort of like a tourist gathering spot. So people keep their distance for the most part, and you just sort of see them solemnly marching. Now in Mandalay, I got to visit a school, and these boys were so excited to have a visitor, and they were, pulling me by the hand, showing me, oh, teacher, this is my spot where I sit, and teacher, this is the book that I'm reading. They just had this just natural enthusiasm and were, so excited. I also visited where nuns and monks get their training. So parents elect to give their kids sort of a sneak peek of just how devout the Buddhist life can be, and then can choose to pursue that path further depending on the family. So with the 1948 independence of Myanmar, at first the country emphasized education. But then in 1962, with the military coup, very quickly the country was impoverished and isolated, and really have since not been able to even recover from the 60s in that regard. So they do lag behind the rest of Southeast Asia. Only about 9 in 10 people are literate in Myanmar. And surprisingly, English is taught as a second language. I'm just very impressed by that. And the majority of the people that I talked to had conversational English. I was just very, very impressed by that, considering how much Burmese I could retain. And then, children of wealthier families generally have better access to higher education and better opportunities in that regard. We're heading northeast, getting pretty close to China, actually, up there in Sepah. So again, that H is silent, and we're under a big, beautiful, ancient banyan tree. More nature, more good weather, a great place to take a long hike. And that's what I did with our local tour guide on the left there. And I completed the hike with 2 really lovely, charming couples who were a lot of fun. And along these hikes, you encounter all sorts of critters, so watch your step. That's a glowworm on the right. I'd never seen one. And that infamous train. They say you're supposed to take the train from here to where we're going next. So that's what I did. I woke up with a really sore neck, like maybe top 3 sorest neck mornings of my life. And of course, that was the morning I was getting on the bounciest ride in the world, like worse than a roller coaster. But we're all smiles because it is this kind of like pandemonium. The train stops every 3 minutes. Vendors will just hop on. You see this woman with the plate of snacks on her head. They're trying to pawn off the snacks on the tourists and talk you into it. And you usually can't resist, so you buy something. And then the train pulls away, and you just see the local vendors scurrying off, and most of them are jumping off of the moving car. I mean, it really is something. Amongst all that, you can look out the window, enjoy some really unbelievable views, including this one where I thought it was smart to hold my iPad out the window. With the climate of Myanmar, it's broken up into 3 seasons. So hot season, which is basically right now, it's 90-degree days there on average. Rainy season, May through October. So that's sort of the tail end of when I was in Myanmar. So most days, maybe there would be a brief shower around lunchtime or nap time, and then maybe a heavy downpour 1 or 2 days a week. But if you've seen my pictures so far, you're probably thinking like, wow, that was considered rainy season. So I think a bit of it was luck, but also the fact that it was the end of the rainy season. cool season, November through February. This is when the most tourists attend. So prices are usually a little higher, but you get these perfect 70-degree days. It's not a good healthcare system, generally speaking, in Myanmar. A lot of this is due to the poor education that we're now familiar with. And this also includes medical education. So the clinics are crowded and understaffed. Something really interesting for me to get used to was that there are no prescriptions in the pharmacies. So you just briefly describe your symptoms to the pharmacist, and then he essentially gives you whatever pills or the quantity that you describe. So really weird for me to get used to. If something serious did happen to you, it would actually be recommended to leave Myanmar and to go to neighboring Thailand or even Singapore. And just know the limitations of your travel insurance. For example, I went to Cuba, and that was not included in my travel insurance. So I was totally taking a risk going to Cuba. You just have to know which countries your insurance covers, and then read the fine prints, which could also include the level of care or the amount of dollars covered. That's the stuff I don't like to talk about, but I think it's just so important to know that as a traveler and to protect yourself. You can think you're saving yourself $100 or $200, but long term, that's just not worth it if something serious were to occur. All right, so now we're headed to Bagan, which is full of ancient temples. And it's broken up into Old Bagan, which is what we're looking at right here atop one of the temples, as well as New Bagan. New Bagan has the restaurants, the hostels, the hotels, all of that. So it's highly recommended that you wake up in pitch black darkness and you ride your motorbike into the Old Bagan city center, which is exactly what I did. And you find a parking spot next to one of these temples, and then you climb to the top and you wait for the sun. And just when you think it can't get any more beautiful, they release the hot air balloons, which dance across the horizon, and you just kind of are in this moment. You can ride the air balloon for, I think, like $250, or you could do what I did, which was just admire them from afar for free. Another uncomfortable topic to talk about is the persecution of the Rohingya Muslims, who have actually been a part of the country's fabric for the last 1,000 years. And it wasn't until the 1962 coup that all of a sudden this became a problem, where Muslims were excluded, couldn't run for government office, they couldn't even join the army. They have even been denied their citizenship of Myanmar. And these attacks on them have resulted in their being driven from their land, the burning of their places of worship, their mosques, mass killings, and just some really unspeakable acts. If you look at the year 2017, thousands were killed, thousands, and hundreds of villages burned to the ground. That's just in 1 year. So they've been targeted very aggressively. The ones that have survived have had to seek refuge in neighboring countries. And Suu Kyi had been criticized for her inaction when it was so clearly happening under her nose. But as we kind of know, she made a deal with the devil and sort of had to turn a blind eye so as not to upset the military junta. And I think that's part of the conundrum is all this beauty that I was experiencing and the wonderful interactions of the people. And then you have, sort of these terrible things happening right under our noses. And that's just a hard reality to swallow that I really still haven't come to terms with. So we go to Kalau next. and you're able to wander through some local villages of Kalau. And visit a girls' school along the way. And this is a 2-day hike. You actually spend the night at a Buddhist monastery. You sleep on wooden planks because you're on the ground with a thin sheet. Ice cold shower, if you want to call it that. It's just like a barrel of water. And then you have like a little tin can that you scoop, and you attempt to sort of wash yourself in that way. That was the roughest accommodation I had in Myanmar. Generally speaking, there are just decent or great hotels available. Luxury ones you're going to pay for, but they're big, beautiful rooms. You know, room service, breakfast buffet, all the trimmings and bells and whistles. I was able to enjoy basic hostels on my backpacker budget for about $20 a night. It's the old-fashioned knock on the door and ask if there's room at the inn. If the owner says yes, then you can drop your bags. Otherwise, you have to find the next nearest hostel or hotel. As I said, hostels were actually quite rare in Myanmar. Small rooms, bad ventilation, nothing to write home about, that's for sure. Power outages even occurred. The Wi-Fi sometimes barely worked. But you don't go to Myanmar to spend the time on your phone, you know, talking on the Wi-Fi. So good way to just get off the grid. And then I said you actually hike this final leg. So in 2 days, we went from Kalau to our final stop of the evening. And you may be familiar with this final spot, Inle Lake. And of course, it's recommended that you get on the water while you are visiting Inle Lake. You can take a tour, which we did. And then you can see a fisherman on the right side with the net. He would catch what he could. And then after a certain number of catches or weights that he would accumulate, he would row back to shore and sell his catches. This lovely lady was able to give us a tour of the floating village where locals live. And you can see even during the rainy season, there's still a lot of space between the water and sort of where flooding could become an issue. So they've amazingly built these structures and they hold over time. It's a great place too to be invited for lunch. So one of the local housewives fried fish for us. She put together the lepitao salad, that's that fermented tea leaf salad we talked about, a fresh salad, some soup with local vegetables, and of course that staple of rice. Now, when you're leaving Myanmar, it's important, at least I would recommend abiding by that 28-day rule. However, if you do overstay, the cost would be $1 per day. So since I stayed for 30 days, you have to basically slip $1 for each day that you've overstayed into your passport. So I did that, and I handed my passport to the border patrol agent, and he kind of looked at it and just slipped out the $2, tucked them in his pocket, and then everything was all right. He gave me the stamp, and off I went to India. Actually, I continued to fly west from Myanmar, but I think it is important to mention too that Myanmar is the perfect gateway to other parts of Southeast Asia. So don't just fly over it and go to Thailand. There's a lot to do here. Of course, we have to wait for when it's safe to do so again. I really hope that's sooner than later. My friend Daphne, who was actually around in Pa'an, you might have seen a picture of her. I just think she sums up the spirit of Myanmar so beautifully, so I asked her to do a video for us.
What I loved most about Myanmar while I was living there for 3 months was the people. I would often walk into a new city and people would come up to me and chat me up, either to practice their English or to come ask me about my country, or mostly to tell me about theirs and what they love about it. They would offer me to bring me to another site that I haven't seen yet, recommend hotels, restaurants that I should try. And I thought that was the sweetest thing because they were really proud of their country. As for the food, I really loved Myanmar food. I tasted some things I had never tasted before. It was a lot of fish-based food, which was surprising at first, but I ended up really loving it. Some snacks on the side of the road would be so delicious that I would order 2 or 3. And it was always so cheap, which was convenient. In terms of the site, I've traveled all over Myanmar, from the temples in Bagan to Inle Lake. And there's so many different sites to see, a diversity of attractions in this country that makes it a must-see in the world.
Thank you to Daphne as well as to Martin for doing their videos. And I think she really summed it up beautifully. With that, I would love to deconstruct with you and then answer your questions. So if you are able to eventually go to Myanmar, you are going to reap the rewards of a road less traveled. The challenges you're going to face will occur, and they will not always be pleasant, and you're not always going to be sleeping in the most comfortable beds. But you're going to just be rewarded with beautiful landscapes, unbelievable food. It's actually a pretty cheap place to travel, and friendly locals. I should have that bolded and underlined and italicized because it's genuine. There's still a bit of kind of like a freshness about tourists visiting Myanmar, whereas maybe some of the locals in Thailand might be a little jaded by now, since Thailand is like a well-traveled destination, but there's still some simplicity and charm in Myanmar to be had. Another takeaway I had is that democracy is fragile. So it's amazing what can happen in such a short period of time. We know the situation there now, and you are thankful that the bonds of democracy hold, in our country, and continue to be stable, hopefully, in all the other democratically led countries of the world. These people are tough as nails. They're resilient. They've had a very troubling past, an uncertain present, and really they don't know what's to come in the future. So it's sort of this mindset that they have, this mentality that everything's going to be all right. They're optimistic. They're teaching the kids what's right from what's wrong, and you see these younger generations stepping up to the plate. With that, I feel travel yields gratitude. I'm so thankful that I have a supportive family to come home to after my insane travels sometimes, as well as access to great healthcare, employment opportunities, education. These people across the world want the same things that we have, but the difference is they just may simply not have access to it. So I really try not to take that for granted and make the most of it, and to make a difference at the local level. And of course, as you know, you can work and volunteer as you travel abroad. So Myanmar, definitely in my thoughts. We hope for a turnaround very soon. And with that, I just want to catch you up on what's next for me. I should actually be in Japan teaching English right now, but that's been postponed due to the pandemic. However, I may find myself getting back to Japan later this year. In the meantime, I teach English classes online, one-on-one to students who live in China. I do this a couple mornings a week. And this is just a great way to help kids with reading and writing, speaking and listening of English. I tutor kids here in Evanston as well as in neighboring Wilmette, sort of bridging the gaps of their e-learning situations, catching them up in that regard. And then lastly, getting to do these travel presentations at night with well-traveled folks like you. So I look forward to when we can get back to in-person talks, but in the meantime, This is a great solution. I really appreciate Schaumburg Township for inviting me again tonight. Keep in touch, please, if you think of any questions after the presentation, after the Q&A. My email address is brmicha@gmail.com. And feel free to give feedback about the talk, what went right, what maybe could be fixed. I'm always tweaking and improving to make it the best it can be for future attendees. My Instagram, Mindful Vagabond. And then if you check out facebook.com/Mindful Vagabond, you'll see a list, sort of a calendar of my upcoming virtual events during the spring and into the summer. So with that, everybody, may your map be filled with many pins. Be well, stay safe. I hope that you enjoyed Mysterious Myanmar.
All right. Thank you, Brian. That was great. So it looks like we've got 3 comments. Looks like Linda has also been to Myanmar and just wanted to share some of her experience with everyone. She writes that Myanmar has changed very much between my 4 visits to the country. First in 2007 when we entered on foot just north of Chiang Rai, and as day visitors to go into a market. Times were troubled and locals came to tell us how things were politically. We were afraid to discuss anything political. We went back 3 times more, but this time for 3 weeks or longer with visas. You could not use a credit card in the first years we were there, and cell phones and ATMs were unheard of on our last trip. Do you have any comments on that, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, it's so great to hear somebody being able to see it really in its infancy stages of tourism. I like how she mentioned, politics. Not only do you not talk about it, you're afraid to talk about it. You just don't. So it's amazing to sort of see how that's affected the people and sort of the position that they're in today. And then, yes, I heard from other travelers who had been to Myanmar too, that, my gosh, Brian, you got to use a credit card? Are you kidding me? That's insane. They just didn't have that technology, even, in 2010 and certainly before that.
Yeah. Linda says she highly recommends a trip to Myanmar when things are politically more stable. She left a piece of her heart and still have several friends there. So hopefully they are safe. And let's see, do we have any other questions out there?
Thanks for sharing, Linda. Appreciate that.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. All right, well, it looks like we don't really have any other questions. So Brian, Chezu Timbarte, we really appreciate
nice. Very
Thank
impressive,
you.
Matt.
Thank you. I practiced. I had enough time. Thank you for sharing your presentation. And thank you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful